Good evening. Welcome back to Midnight Whisper. Tonight's story isn't about monsters or haunted houses. It's about something far deeper, a mother's love that refused to die, and a daughter who found her way back home through the silence. Turn off the lights, take a breath, and listen closely. I was playing with my daughter in the living room, laughing so hard I almost forgot what sadness felt like. The sound of her tiny footsteps echoing between the furniture as she ran, her golden hair flying behind her like sunlight that refused to fade. And my heart felt warm for the first time in what felt like forever. Because grief had been my only companion for months. And yet, here she was again, holding my fingers with those small hands that once reached for me in the dark. And I could almost believe that everything was okay again, that the world hadn't taken her away from me, that the nights I cried myself to sleep were only a bad dream. And her laughter filled the house with a kind of music I thought I'd never hear again. A sound so pure it erased the silence that had haunted every corner since she left. And I spun her around, her giggles melting into the air, soft and sweet, wrapping around me like sunlight on a winter morning. And for a brief moment, I wasn't a grieving mother anymore. I was just a mom, playing with her little girl, feeling alive, breathing again, loving again, until I heard his voice from the hallway, quiet, trembling, like it carried all the weight of our loss, saying, "Honey, come inside. There's no one there." And my smile froze, my world stopped. My breath caught somewhere between love and terror. I turned slowly, my eyes searching the living room, my hands still reaching for where her fingers should have been. But the air was cold now, empty, still, as if time itself had held its breath. And I stood there, staring at the spot where she had been only a second ago, her laughter fading like a dream at dawn. And I felt my knees weaken as I looked around the room, expecting to see her hiding behind the couch or peeking from behind the curtains. But there was nothing, only silence, heavy and thick. And then my eyes fell to the floor, to that small, familiar shape sitting on the carpet, her doll, the one with the cracked porcelain cheek and the faded blue dress, the one she never went to sleep without, the one I buried with her when we said our final goodbyes, the one that should have been under the earth, resting with her. And I felt the air leave my lungs, my heart pounding like thunder in my chest, my husband's footsteps growing closer as he whispered my name again, afraid to come near me, afraid to see what I saw, because we both knew this wasn't just imagination. It wasn't a dream. It was her, our little girl, reaching across whatever divides the living and the dead, reminding us that love doesn't end. It only changes shape, and sometimes it comes back to dance. I fell to my knees beside the doll, my hands shaking as I reached for it, feeling that old, familiar fabric between my fingers, cold and damp like it had just been pulled from the ground. And I remembered that day, the day we buried her, the sound of the rain hitting the coffin, the the way my husband couldn't look at me. How I promised I'd never forget her laughter, never stop talking to her, even if no one else believed. And here I was, a year later, talking to her again, laughing with her, feeling her breath near mine. And I didn't know whether to scream or to pray. Because what do you do when the person you miss the most comes back? Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a feeling so real it steals your breath away. And I whispered her name through the tears, waiting for a reply, for a sign that she was still there. But the only sound was the clock ticking, slow and cruel, reminding me that time keeps moving even when your world stands still. And I realized then that maybe she wasn't gone. Not really. Maybe she was still here, trapped between worlds, drawn back by my grief, by the love that refused to let her rest. That night, I sat in the dark, holding the doll close to my chest, the smell of earth still clinging to it, and I could swear I heard soft footsteps in the hallway, faint laughter, a whisper that brushed against my ear, saying, "Mommy," and it broke me all over again, because it wasn't fear I felt. It was longing, raw and endless, the kind of love that makes you wish the impossible could be real. And as I looked around the room, the shadows seemed to move, to breathe, to take shape, and for a heartbeat, I saw her again, standing by the window, bathed in the pale light of the moon, her eyes gentle, her smile sad, and I wanted to run to her, to hold her. But I knew that if I did, she would vanish again. So I stayed still, whispering, "I love you, baby." And she tilted her head, almost like she heard me, like she understood, before fading into the light, leaving behind only silence, and that broken doll lying in my lap, its cracked face staring back at me like a memory that refuses to fade. The next morning, my husband didn't ask what happened, and I didn't tell him, because there were no words for it, no way to explain the impossible. And maybe he saw it too, the small handprint on the fogged window, the one that didn't belong to either of us. Or maybe he just pretended not to, because sometimes denial is the only way to survive. And for days afterward, I felt her presence everywhere, the faint sound of a lullaby humming from her old room, the swing creaking outside when there was no wind, the faint smell of her strawberry shampoo drifting through the hall. And each time I felt it, I smiled through my tears, because even though she was gone, she was still here, and I knew I'd never be truly alone again, because love, even in death, leaves echoes, and maybe those echoes are what haunt us most, not to scare us, but to remind us that once we were loved beyond reason. Now every night, I sit in that same living room, the doll resting on the chair across from me. And sometimes, when the lights flicker and the air turns cold, I hear her laugh again, soft, distant, like a memory finding its way back home. And I close my eyes and let it fill me, because in that sound, I find everything I lost, everything I still am, and maybe one day, when my time comes, I'll follow that laughter into the dark, and we'll play again, just like before, around the furniture, through the rooms of forever, her tiny fingers holding mine as we run toward the light. And maybe then, I'll finally be alive again.